Hello, dear ones. This is Alyce Dylan, and you are at the Indigo Rose Lounge. This is a virtual space that exists for spiritually perceptive individuals to hopefully enhance your life experience. And for me, as a surviving indigo adult for many decades now, to share with you some of what I have learnt and experienced over the time. I am clairaudient, clairvoyant, intuitive, and most of the clairs given any particular situation. But if you read my book, Alone in the Sea of Normal, I explain there how these are merely methods of translation, of communication downloaded to us from either beings in the next world, our guides, our ancestry, or our higher selves. Our experience of life is very different from those who are five sense. And I stumbled upon or downloaded a concept the other day that I thought would help a lot of you in keeping clear the different realms of the human experience. So, in the human experience, we have the physical experience, which is your human existence. So, at the moment of conception, your spirit self enters into the equation of conception and gives life to your human experience. And your spirit does so on purpose in order to have fun. Really. You do it for joy. We do this. We come here for joy. We come here for learning. And we come to experience love. We come here to learn and understand the application or the dance between love and fear, the application of love in our world, the powers of true, essential, and fundamental forces, so that we can learn to harness these ourselves. And in our physical experience, in our human experience, there is a force we know, everyone knows it well, called gravity. Gravity is not out there concept. Things fall down. That's what we understand. We drop something, it falls to the ground. So in the physical reality, gravity is a force that moves downward. Downward. Yeah? So if you have an emotional scale, if you have a frequency calculator, you will see that the material world really exists in the lowest possible vibration. So this thing, quantum physics tells us, that this thing that I would call a death, it's not actually anything solid at all. It is energy that has all agreed in atomic form to stick together for a period of time and vibrate at exactly the same frequency and form what we know as a material form. Our bodies are a little more fluid. The bodies aren't as dense. They're movable and they move around and they complete a million functions every moment. But there still is an agreement within our cells, which are energy, to behave in certain ways. And these things, once they reach a level of solidity, would be the language we would use. Once they achieve solidity, they obey certain laws within the solid realm. And those laws include obedience to gravity. Gravity exists. And so hard, heavy items fall as even light items fall. Everything tends downward in material reality. Now, if you've done any energy work, or if you've spent any time connecting with your higher self, your true spiritual self, you will know that in the realms of being above the solid, exactly the opposite is true. That gravity, in that sense, that inexplicable pull, happens in the opposite direction. So when you raise your frequency and move your awareness into your spiritual or essential self, the pull is now upward. upward. Yeah, when you relax and you allow and just sit in the flow of feeling your natural, your resting state in higher frequencies, then subjects you to a pull like gravity, which is not down the frequency scale, but rather up the frequency scale. So if you're sitting, if you're meditating and you completely relax, your consciousness, your awareness will be pulled, and I'm not talking yanked, gentle, will be pulled upward. If you'd like, we go lightward. We go towards the light. Yeah. So it's an interesting dichotomy to help us understand that as spiritually awake individuals, we always reach lightward. We naturally do. We naturally reach for lighter, for more loving, for joyful, for kinder in our essential self. And yet, those confined to their physical reality are more aware or more conscious of the pull downward. This actually helped me to understand Esther Hicks, and then, of course, Abraham, who is the collective that speaks through Esther. Abraham speaks of following your joy, following your bliss, which as spiritually perceptive people we know is the way to harness eudaimonic resonance. In other words, if we're looking for better for our lives, if we're looking to heal, to get more proficient, the way to do that is to head in the direction of bliss and joy and love. But people who come from a five-sensed world, a five-sensed reality, when you say to them, follow your bliss, there is a disjoint in interpretation there. And they tend to come back at you with things like, oh, so I should just do what's good for me and bug everybody else. And, and there it is. There is the difference between the life of a spiritual being having a human experience and the life of a purely human experience without spiritual consciousness. When you are living a purely human experience without any connection to your spirit self, then the only realms that you will understand, the only vibrations you will understand, is a kind of excitement, maybe adventure, maybe passion, maybe, that at a very physical level. And this is where people like the shiny bums or those who get themselves corrupted tend to go wrong. They're just filling their desires. They're following what feels good to them, but they have no spiritual reality in the present moment. They have no spiritual connection. And so they couldn't possibly understand pure joy, pure bliss, and love from a pure perspective. Because pure joy, bliss, and love exist in an almost spiritual state. It's an essential state. Whereas when you talk about purely animal gratification, the human forms of gratification and lust and satiation on a greed level, for example, those are all mud-dwelling things. They are down there in the wrestle down in the mud with others and see what you can win. And there's a very different pull in pure physical reality. The pull in pure physicality is going to be downwards, gravity woods. Whereas somebody who is living a human experience, but with a connection with their spiritual reality, knowing that they are an essential spiritual being, having an eternal life with a temporary human experience, the more time they spend in their spiritual essential truth, their tendency is lightwards, is lovewards, is up. the frequency scalewards. Whereas people who spend majority of their existence in their animal, animalistic, and I don't mean that in the derogatory way, I love animals, but a human being with no spiritual consciousness or complete detachment from their spiritual consciousness. And we can go into arguments about why that might be. But a person living a purely physical, animalistic human experience is not going to have that opposite pole upwards. Does that make any sense to you? It seemed very clear to me that there are people that you meet who feel confined to this state of being. They are animal level frequency. Everything they love, everything that excites them is physical level stuff. Animal gratification, or it's hoarding, or it's satiation on a physical perspective. Whereas there are other people you meet who are, in essence, being pulled in two directions. They are living this human experience, but their connection with their eternal spiritual self means that they are also being pulled up frequency. So almost in the opposite direction. Although we don't mean, when we say pulled upward, we mean in terms of frequency, not in terms of time and space. So we think of frequency as going up the scale, whereas we think of gravity as going down, but both can be happening in the same space-time reality at the same time. There we go. A thought for today. That might break someone's noodle, but it also might explain to some people why they feel so torn in this human reality. Sometimes. But remember, the answer to all of it is always to love. Always.